Alrighty, it looks like we got pretty much everybody filtered in here now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kaylee Robinson. I am the Park Development Manager here for the City of Lubbock Parks and Recreation. Really appreciate all of you coming out tonight and being here for this presentation over our Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces Master Plan. It has been a labor of love for the last year and a half, so we're super excited that the final portion is finally here and we get to show all of you guys what all we've been working on with Half Associates. I first want to just thank several of our important members for being here. So we have Councilwoman Christy Martinez Garcia joining us tonight. We also have former Councilman Mr. Randy Christian there at the back. And then our Director Colby Van Gundy is also at the back there. So also big shout out to all of our Park Board members for being here. Really appreciate that, as well as all of our lovely Parks and Rec staff and other city staff as well. So without further ado, so that we can get the night moving on, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Aaron Tooley with Half Associates. He has been the lead on this project for us, so I will hand it over to Aaron.
Thank you very much, Kaylee. Good evening, folks. Thanks very much for coming this evening to this open house. I will, over the next 20 to 30 minutes, give you a quick whirlwind overview of this Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan, and hopefully field any questions that you all might have. But please don't feel compelled to leave immediately afterwards. We'll be out in the lobby answering any questions and just walking around and maybe explaining further what we have displayed on the various boards outside. So, as Kaylee mentioned, this has been it has been a labor of love. This has been a great planning kind of experience. We've been working on this plan for about almost 18 months now. A lot of very complex kind of aspects to this plan, but I'm hoping that you all will be as enthusiastic about what we've come up with as far as our findings and recommendations as we have. So to begin at the beginning, I'll say this was the first slide that we started with this whole planning initiative, where we wanted to just remind people that when you think about the world's great cities, you don't think about the various roads or other infrastructure that compose the city. You think about the spaces and the places that are in those cities, mainly parks. So if you think about Austin, Zilker Park, my hometown of Houston, we have Discovery Green, New York City's Central Park. There are a lot of great cities and a lot of great parks. There are also a lot of benefits that come from parks, from economic development and increased tourism, to health benefits, to just creating that sense of place and a sense of community. Parks really do a lot for us and provide us with that requisite open space just to get out from the hardscape confines of everyday living in the city. Also, as far as increasing property values, we've found there's definitive evidence that parks really do increase property values, particularly in residential areas. But I was going to say that I think we all recognize that during the whole COVID pandemic, that really illuminated for everyone the importance of having parks, to be outside, to socialize with your friends, albeit at a safe distance. So that's what parks were able to provide for us. So to jump right into this master plan, this is a Texas Parks and Wildlife Department compliant plan, meaning there are certain criteria that we must fulfill in developing the parks master plan. There are certain types of assessments that we need to go through to make sure that we are able to check off the requisite boxes, but at the same time, this will then enable the city to be eligible for increased grant funding and other opportunities through the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. The master plan, it's a long plan, but there's a lot to it. So we broke it into 6 principal chapters, each focusing on a particular element of your parks and open spaces and recreational facilities. All of this, again, when it comes to the benefits of parks and how this whole plan is put together, is all laid out within our first chapter, which is the introductory chapter. As I was mentioning, with each one of those principal sections, we did go through a litany of different types of assessments. A demand-based assessment, where this is where we had a very robust public engagement program, where we had scores of listening sessions, small group listening sessions, whether it was with an environmental group or a particular sports group. We had many meetings with our pickleball friends throughout the duration of this assignment. But we also conducted a fairly robust community survey, and we got some, I want to say, 4,500 survey responses from that. And that really helped to inform us as far as what were the needs or the interests of you as the community of Lubbock. A standards-based assessment basically looks at the distribution of your parks and recreational facilities. It also looks at the various ways parks should be classified. And when it comes to park classifications, we look to the National Recreation and Parks Association for guidance on that. And I'll get into that momentarily. We also performed an operations-based assessment, which I'll get into momentarily, about how does the Parks Department here in Lubbock manage your parks and recreation facilities, but compared to other cities around Texas, how does it stand up to those communities? Is it adequately funded? Do you have the requisite maintenance staff to do what's needed to be done? From a park conditions assessment, we worked with Texas Tech University's Department of Landscape Architecture, and we developed a full-blown asset management program based on the conditions of your parks. And this will be a hugely invaluable tool for your department in maintaining your parks well into the future. Lubbock's Parks Department is probably the only department that I know of that has or will have an asset management program in order to manage its facilities. And then finally, we conducted a resource-based assessment as far as what additional resources might we consider that could be valuable in incorporating into your parks and recreational facilities. So as I mentioned, when it comes to the National Recreation and Parks Association classification methodology, there are several classifications of parks. There are regional parks that serve a wide audience. Regional parks could not only serve the city of Lubbock, but neighboring cities as well. Community parks are parks that where people from 1 to 5 mile radius will go to that park, and they have a certain number of amenities and recreational facilities, sports facilities, etc. Neighborhood parks they're smaller parks, and they're generally designed to be in a neighborhood, but are within a half-mile walking distance, if you will. They typically don't have off-street parking, for example. They're designed to walk and to support the open space needs of a neighborhood. Then you have other parks, pocket parks, special use facilities. You could consider the Canyon Lakes in a lot of ways kind of a special use facility. Sports complexes, linear parks, etc. So there are a variety of types of parks that we wanted to classify in order to further analyze what's contained within those parks, what are the kind of the access related issues, etc. So we did break the plan down into several discrete goals, 5 principal goals to be exact. When it came to Chapter 2, the overarching goal here was, and Chapter 2 is really focused on Lubbock's parks per se, of which there are at least 83 parks. But our goal was a network of beautiful and well-maintained parks, facilities, and open space resources serve the recreational needs of a diverse community. So based on our demand-based assessment, our standards-based assessment, we went forth and started really analyzing the condition and the location of your parks. From a demand-based assessment, again, these were multiple survey questions. I just wanted to highlight a couple so you understand how we learned or what we learned from the responses. But the first question, please select the 3 most important actions the Lubbock Parks and Recreation Department can take for parks and recreation. And so the predominant one was to renovate existing neighborhood parks, playgrounds, shelters, parking, etc. As we talked about in the very beginning of this planning program, the Lubbock's park system went through probably 20 plus years of not receiving the care and the maintenance that it really needed until most recently. So one thing I think that everybody recognized was that parks had been neglected, and so they needed more effort, more capital, more resources needed to go into the parks and the parks department in order for them to do what needed to be done. Secondly, develop additional walking and biking trails. This is a national kind of trend that we see in all of the communities that we work with when we're developing parks and recreation master plans, is that there is an acute interest in having places to walk safely. Off-street recreational trails that might be in an urban area, they might be in a more of a semi-wilderness area, but people like to walk and stroll and stuff like that. Construct new splash pads in existing parks. Well, we definitely heard, and the city heard that as well, and I'll get into that momentarily. So again, there are a variety of different responses to that question, which we acknowledged. Secondly, which initiatives should the Lubbock Parks Department prioritize for future implementation? Select all that apply. So developing and improving existing facilities, we heard again. Acquire land for future parks development. Develop more passive recreational kind of facilities. So all of those we again took into consideration. Just moving on very quickly. A third question, please select the recreational facilities that you or members of your family are interested in. Again, hike and bike trails, playgrounds, play areas for children, of course, family picnic areas, splash pads, natural areas. Question 4, please select the recreational programs that you or members of your family are interested in. Outdoor adventure programs ranked the highest. And this is, again, another kind of national trend that we're seeing. People are into adventure kind of related stuff. And so we tried to take that into account, as well as semi-wilderness kind of recreation, passive recreation, when we developed the master plan for the Canyon Lakes. So all of these are very important kind of responses that guided and informed this master plan. When it comes to the standards-based assessment, this was very interesting. Again, you have 83 key parks within the city limits. We like to think in principle that you shouldn't have to drive to a park. You should always be able to walk to a park, right? That's kind of a basic kind of premise. Well, what we did was irrespective of the park classification, what we did was we drew a 1/2 mile radius around each park. A 1/2 mile radius is about a 10-minute walk. So, and we found that within all of your residential areas within Lubbock, 80% of your citizens have access to, within a 5-minute walk to a park. So that's fairly huge. That's almost unheard of as far as us doing parks and recreation master plans. So that's great, but we still recognize that when it comes to South Lubbock, Southwest Lubbock, where there's a lot of population growth, there's not necessarily the requisite park resources now. And so that's why it's going to be very important for the Parks Department and the city to work with your development community in the future to ensure that there's enough park space that's set aside within new residential subdivisions to not only amenitize those residential subdivisions, but also just to make sure that we're allocating parks and open space, just so, again, people don't have to drive to go to a park. With all of these different assessments, we did apply or compare Lubbock to what we called regional comparison communities. These were key communities that were identified based on a quality of life index that we utilized, as well as the population, as well as we wanted them to be in Texas. We did start with kind of a national kind of survey and comparison, but the city was concerned that we weren't necessarily comparing apples to apples. And so using a quality of life index ensured that we could make sure that our basically our median income was very similar to from one city to another. So these are the cities that we utilized for our comparisons. So from an operations-based assessment, we did come up with a number of interesting findings. I'm not going to belabor this point, but I will go over some of the key findings. One being that currently the Lubbock Parks and Recreation Department spends significantly less per acre on parkland compared to other Texas communities. So we found, and you can see this on the bar chart on the right side, that the median amount of money spent by most comparison communities was a little over $7,000 per acre, whereby with Lubbock, we're spending a little less than $3,500 per acre. So we're about half the median of our regional comparison communities. So that's significant because you have a lot of parkland and not that many staff, but spending will need to go up in order to especially implement all of the recommendations and strategies that are within this master plan. Secondly, the Parks Department spends less per capita on a per capita basis when evaluated against regional comparison communities. So when you're thinking about the Parks Department's operating budget per capita, the median is about $63. Lubbock is around $46. So we have a little bit of ways to go to be comparable to other communities. Then most importantly, when it comes to parkland acres per maintenance, the Lubbock's Parks Department has about 58 full-time equivalents, that's full-time staff, FTEs, to manage over about 3,500 acres of parkland. So on a per FTE basis, you have your maintenance guys are maintaining at least 58 acres compared to most cities are only maintaining 26 acres. So they're being forced to manage well over twice the amount of land that other communities are managing. And these parks are spread out all over the city, as you well know. So this is an issue. And we heard this through our demand-based assessment and survey. From a resource-based standpoint, and I won't belabor these points either, but we did look at all of the, when it comes to, again, we wanted to make sure that there are opportunities for additional trails, walking paths, that kind of thing. So we were looking at what utility corridors, right-of-way easements, transmission corridors might be activated to link parks together, to link points of origin to key destinations, whether they be residential areas to parks, residential areas to schools, to libraries, et cetera. So our resource-based assessment gets into all of that, as well as what are the key vehicular corridors that we might improve, like an on-street bike lane or a shared use facility that would be off-street, that would link the most parks together, that would link, again, residential areas to schools, et cetera. So some of the key objectives that were coming out of Chapter 2, 1, ensuring an equitable distribution of connected and accessible parks and facilities. And then Objective 1.2, improve the ecological function and the environmental character of Lubbock's parks. And I will try to go through this fairly quickly. It's complicated, it's kind of technical, but I'll do my best to keep it simple. As you all know, most of your parks have playas in them. That's why the park is there. It's because you have a playa, you have a 100-year floodplain, you have a 500-year floodplain. It's not suitable for development in those areas. Playas are very interesting geomorphological features. To me, living in Houston, we don't have playas. To me, like a playa is kind of like your landscape is like the surface of a golf ball. You have all these little playas all over the place that become playas when after a rainstorm and they hold water for a certain period of time. Well, natural playas, as you see on the left, function a little bit differently than urban playas, and you have overflow playas and you have non-overflow playas, but they're fairly complicated features. But they're very important when it comes to improving and maintaining the drainage within your community. As we all recognize, your playas, when you've gone through periods of drought, you haven't had much water, they become these big kind of muddy messes, and they just don't look that great. Here you can see at the edge of Maxey Parks Playa on the left side of the screen. But on the right side of the screen, excuse me, on the left side of the screen is a playa in southern Illinois that was restored. And it just shows what a playa can look like if you allow the water to basically irrigate all of the vegetation around the playa. Now, I recognize that here in the Llano Estacado, these are very harsh conditions, right? I mean, it's not like you get a lot of rainfall. You have a lot of salts in the soils that prevent a lot of vegetation from growing. So, and then when it does rain, these things fill up and you'll have vegetation that is inundated underwater for days on end. So it's a pretty harsh environment. But what we're hoping to do is improve that to where this is the playa in Clap Park. This is a very nice, attractive playa. It seems like the vegetation around the playa has done very well for most of the time. But so what we've done is we've, again, worked with Texas Tech University as well as other water resource folks within Half Associates, my company, to figure out a way whereby we might, instead of allowing stormwater to flow down through these concrete culverts and go straight into the playa, what we're hoping to do is impede that flow, maybe remove some of those concrete culverts, which cause a lot of pedestrian circulation problems anyway, but impede that flow and allow the water to move laterally, horizontally, kind of with the grade to where it starts to filter down into the soil long before it gets to the actual playa water body, thereby irrigating new vegetation that could grow around the outside of the playa. So that's the plan. We've passed it by your city's Water Resources Department as well as city engineer, and they think that this could be a plausible way of improving the visual and ecological quality of your playas. And it would be a very easy thing to test out through a small demonstration project, just using one outfall going into one playa, for example. So that's what we're looking at. And it could look something cool like this as well, where you could have access, you could improve access to the edge of the playa if you could rely on, with any degree of certainty, the water level, etc. This is a new park in downtown Houston. I live about a block away from this, so we're down there all the time. But a really nice little kind of water feature. It's about 5 acres, not dissimilar to the playas that you all have. A second thing that we're looking at is how can we ecologically restore some of your parks, for example, and turn them more into short grass prairie kind of landscapes. And this is, again, something that was done in Memorial Park in Houston as well, whereby we could allow, instead of mowing, the Parks Department has I believe it's a $1.1 million mowing contract for all of your parks, mowing medians in your thoroughfares, parks, etc. Is there a way that we can reduce the amount of lawn that's being mowed by changing the aesthetic a little bit to where we can allow a Texas shortgrass prairie to grow in certain places in your parks areas? So that's, and this was kind of a little demonstration using Higginbotham Park, for example, allowing more vegetation to grow in certain areas. So it becomes more interesting. So you don't see, from one vantage point, you don't see the entire park, but maybe you have to kind of meander through the park in order to really understand all of the special places and spaces in the park. Additional objectives in Chapter 2 were programming enhancements, thinking about inexpensive ways to create special amenities within parks that would attract people. One thing we've done very well in Houston are what we call storybook trails, where we have little stands with a storybook that you can go from one stand to another stand and read an enlarged book to a child or allow them to read to you. But you can go, again, from station to station and read an entire book as you're walking, a 1.5 miles within a park or something like that. So a whole lot of different kinds of inexpensive ways you can introduce new programming into parks. A key objective here, enhancing maintenance practices to ensure a network of high-quality parks and recreational facilities. We have, as I'd mentioned, developed this asset management program whereby we have systematically digitized and then assigned a lifespan to every single element in every single park, to whereby if, let's say, Colby Van Gundy wants to top dress all of your decomposed granite trails in all of your parks. Let's say he wants to put an inch top dressing on every trail at one time. He can literally push a button and figure out exactly what the quantity of decomposed granite it would take to do that top dressing. So this will be a miraculous kind of tool that will be extremely helpful to everybody in the Parks Department as far as identifying task orders, identifying when something ought to be replaced, when something should be winterized, etc. I had mentioned expanding parks programming, and then from a resource-based assessment, thinking about the resources of third-party partnerships whereby you could further expand your parks and recreation facilities. Here's a couple slides quickly on the parks condition assessment that we developed, but we identified a rating system whereby we looked at the red is like not safe and it needs to be addressed immediately because somebody could get hurt, to green being excellent, new, and fully functioning. But we looked at all of the elements that are composed within your parks, from sidewalks to street lighting to benches to water fountains to grills, all of those elements. And by assigning a condition to those elements, we can then assign a lifespan. So then Colby will know, okay, this grill got a rating of 1.5. That means it's going to have about a year lifespan. So it's going to need to be replaced in a year. And then a year comes along, and the program will spit out a task order saying, okay, it's time to replace this grill. So, and that way the Parks Department can develop a much more robust but better informed budget to submit to City Council. So we looked at, again, park elements. We looked at park materials as well, but assigned values. And so you have this for all of your parks now. It just needs to be shifted over to the city's Cartograph asset management system. And so here you can see different graphic kind of widgets that show, like in Clapp Park, you can see those different squares. That basically shows the area of various elements. So the big green area, of course, is lawn area. But then you also have water, you have natural areas, etc. So each one of those, it just shows the different types of materials that compose your park. And with that widget, you could do that for all of the parks within your whole system at the same time. Or you could just look at all the parks in one council district, for example. So But that is a very exciting tool, and I look forward to being able to present that at conferences and stuff. So, but moving on. Chapter 3 had to do with sports and athletic facilities. Again, you all have a great set of athletic facilities. Our goal was sports and athletic facilities and programs that meet the recreational practice, game, and tournament objectives of a growing community. You have quite the distribution of different types of athletic facilities, sports complexes. We were basically looking at game and tournament facilities as opposed to practice facilities where a lot of your parks already have like a backstop and maybe an unimproved diamond for softball or baseball. When we're talking about improved facilities, or game and tournament facilities, we're looking at lighting, concessions, parking, all of the restrooms, all of those different things that you need to support groups coming in from out of town, for example, to play sports. So looking at from a level of service standpoint, you can see, and this is a little bit complicated. Let me see if I can. Okay, so here you can see in 2021, this is your current population. In 2032, we are projecting your population to be around 345,000 people. It's a significant growth over a 10-year period, basically. But you can see, and this is again based on National Recreation Parks Association standards, but also we vetted this through the Parks Department, and they agreed that, for example, for the first row Diamond Baseball Youth game quality, you ought to have one facility per 10,000 people, right? So here we have, in 2021, we have 27 facilities, but based on your population, it's showing that we need 4 additional diamond fields right now to support the demand, which is increasing. In all of our meetings with your youth sports leagues, they have not only bounced back from COVID, but they're doing extremely well. They need additional facilities. But when you look then on using this recommended level of service, in 2032 for a population of 345,000, you're going to need a total of 35 of those diamond fields. Again, you only have 27 right now, so that means you're going to need an additional 12 facilities. So where are those going to go? There might be some open space in some parks, but not really to build a whole like a cloverleaf kind of sports complex. And so it's going to be important that over the next several years you all start identifying where should these things go and how should they be located so as to support where the population is growing as well. So we went through that kind of exercise for all of your sports facilities. And what our recommendations basically are as follows. You need additional practice, game, and tournament quality facilities, upgrading all of your facilities to really enhance the viability for tournaments, to attract more tournaments to come to Lubbock. There's a huge economic development benefit when Lubbock Sports and others can bring in tournaments from out of town. Indoor sports facilities such as gyms, pools, running tracks, those are non-existent in Lubbock right now. But if you had those, you could just open up, there could be so many different opportunities for new sporting events, indoor sporting events, that could happen all year round, not just in the summer, spring, or fall. So those were the key things that we were recommending as far as how to create quality sports and athletic facilities, not only for your local residents from a practice and game standpoint, but also from a tournament standpoint to attract people from out of town. Moving on, our 4th chapter had to do with indoor recreation and aquatics. So we were really looking a lot at your community centers, your adult activity centers, and your swimming pools. We had 2 goals associated with this chapter. The first, goal number 3, facilities which provide a range of diverse indoor recreational programs and activities for residents of all ages. Goal number 4 was a variety of aquatic facilities to address the demand for water-based recreational programs and activities. I'm sorry, I'm already going over time. I'm sorry about this. I knew this was going to be tough, but I hope you will bear with me and I'll try to speed this up. But, so, quickly, when it comes to your community centers are great. They are popular, but they're dated. Most of these community centers were built in the 1970s. They were built for a different time in Lubbock's, when Lubbock was a smaller community. They're also, I mean, they're old facilities, but they're not able, the directors who direct these facilities, there are all sorts of things that the people, their patrons and constituents want to do, but they just don't have the requisite room in these facilities. Furthermore, the facilities are not geographically distributed to where everybody can take advantage of these facilities. So several objectives coming out of these, but you can see some of the pictures here. They're very well maintained. Again, these are like 70-year-old facilities, but they're very well maintained. But you can see like the kitchen facility on the far right. It's very difficult to have to entertain a cooking class using that kind of kitchen facility. You have an arts and crafts set up in the middle slide in a storeroom, basically. So the directors of these facilities are using every square inch, but it's still not adequate. You have places where you'll have like a community hall with pool tables, with exercise facilities, exercise equipment, all in the same room. So it's going to be you can do a lot of interior space planning to change the configuration of some of these rooms around to make them work maybe a little bit better. But when you start busting out walls and enlarging these, that's when it starts costing a lot of money. So one thing that we were talking about, and here this is what we basically heard from a demand-based assessment. First of all, 28% of the respondents hadn't even been to a community center, so that gave us pause. But there are concerns over the age and the quality of the facilities, and the respondents are more interested in the fitness and the wellness classes, more so than like the fitness equipment or the social services, teaching people about how to do their taxes or something like that. They're less interested in that, more interested in big open spaces where they can do Zumba or yoga or whatever it is they want to do. So, and here the lack of desired programs and facilities are the main barriers to participation. So one key objective here was to definitely prepare renovation and expansion plans. When the city has the requisite capital, you can start thinking about maybe expanding these to support the need. But one thing that we were really interested in was what these community centers are trying to be is a recreational center. And that's not what they'll never be a full-blown recreation center. So what the city needs is a rec center and an auditorium. But what we were recommending here is that we consolidate all of the fitness equipment, instead of having fitness equipment in every community center, consolidate it into one center and then have perhaps a shuttle that would go from center to center and drop off people and pick them up from using the fitness equipment if that's what they want to do. That way you could open up, that would free up a lot more space inside some of these community centers for the directors to entertain other kinds of programs. So that was a key recommendation that seemed to garner a lot of enthusiasm. Again, as I was mentioning just now, I'm trying to move faster, but the idea of developing a feasibility analysis for developing a full-blown recreational facility in Lubbock and an indoor natatorium, which is an indoor swimming aquatic center, would be definitely in the offing. A city of this size, when you look at NRPA standards, a city this size would have 4 or 5 recreation centers, and Lubbock doesn't have any. So, but these are not a small line item. This is like a $75 million enterprise, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. But so how can we accommodate the demand right now for these kind of facilities? How can we create the requisite partnerships to start planning for that in the future? When it comes to your pools, again, they're in the same kind of state that your community centers are in. They were all built in the oldest one was built in 1953. Both May Simmons and Clapp were built in 1953. Pools don't usually last 75 to 80 years, but the Parks Department has done their best to keep these things functioning for the people that use them, but they could go at any time. So some of the key recommendations coming out of this, I mean, the pool itself the pools themselves are in bad shape. The equipment have all been daisy chained together to kind of function properly, but all of the amenities, the slides, the buckets that pour, all the things that kids like to have, you really don't have at these swimming pools. So what we're recommending is, and this is, and forgive me, Colby, I think this has happened, but are we definitely, okay, so we're replacing all the pools with splash pads. One of our recommendations is to, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, we're replacing 3 with splash pads, and Clapp will be
Exactly. That's what we were going to say, or that's what I was going to say, was that 3 pools are going to be replaced with splash pads, but then Clapp Pool is the most popular, it's the largest, and we were recommending that remain, or that be reconstructed, not renovated, but completely replaced as an outdoor swimming pool. And then to consider building splash pads elsewhere where there is geographic need for those splash pads. Okay, moving on to the one of the more important aspects of this Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and that is the Canyon Lakes. And our goal here was the Canyon Lakes are a regional destination for adventure and nature-based tourism in the heart of the Llano Estacado. So we wanted to make sure that this was a realistic plan for the Canyon Lakes. This is a fantastic amenity. It's like in the middle of this flat, barren, arid area, you have this wonderful kind of oasis of lakes. It's just this amazing thing that has water consistently flowing through it. I mean, you're pumping 1 to 2 million gallons into it every day. So it's a wonderful amenity. So what we are recommending here, and we looked at how the lakes function. We looked at the 6 dams that create the 5 different lakes, and all of the different issues. But our concept here is to make this landscape emulate what the Llano Estacado is all about. We want it to evoke this prairie landscape where we restore a Texas shortgrass prairie back to this place. So when you're in the Canyon Lakes, you feel like you're totally removed from anywhere else in Lubbock. So that was our recommendation from an ecological standpoint: restore the Texas shortgrass prairie. This will then enable predators to come in, raptors, maybe foxes, coyotes, maybe black-footed ferrets that will prey on all the prairie dogs. So this was one of the huge aspects of that. But so prairie restoration, also, and this is being funded by the city through ARPA funds, but dredging the lakes, widening and clearing the streams in between the lakes so we can promote more water-based activities and blueways within the lake system. Looking at your stormwater outfalls and trying to emulate a pool, riffle, run kind of quality to where you can increase the habitat of all the little creatures that swim around in the lakes and that kind of thing. So increasing all of the riparian qualities, but most importantly, improving access to the Canyon Lakes, pedestrian active transportation to the Canyon Lakes, but also within the Canyon Lakes. And so we have a whole slew of different kinds of trail systems from a primary trail spine that would be probably a 12 to 14 foot concrete facility that would run from Burl Huffman Sports Park all the way to the eastern end of proposed lake number 7. It's about I want to say it's about a 13 or 14 mile trip. We're already looking at funding through TxDOT, through their Transportation Alternatives Program, for funding for this very trail. But then we've also developed secondary trails and what we're calling portal trails, which are portals from neighborhoods to the Canyon Lake system to provide safe access for neighborhoods. Prairie trails for people to walk through these newly established Texas shortgrass prairie kind of landscapes that would be complete with interpretive signage, all that kind of stuff. And then enhanced mountain biking trails. So improving access is huge, and you'll see that in all the boards out there, how all those trails work together. Here in Houston, we have along the Buffalo Bayou, this was a project I worked on probably 20 years ago, but which has finally been constructed. It's one of those things, it was great that TxDOT was involved, but it was a problem that TxDOT was involved because it took so long. But here you have a picture of our primary trail along the bayou, but then you have kind of a portal trail going up the hill that's providing a link to a neighborhood. And then you have the secondary trails going off to the right, which are more for pedestrians rather than the cyclists and stuff. Again, improved water-based recreational activities from paddleboard to canoe and kayak rentals to enhanced inclusive portages and means for people to have access to the water. All those kind of amenities. And we did lay out a provisional program for a phased approach in developing a blue ways system from the top of lake number 1 down to the bottom of lake number 6, excuse me. We also were looking at improved ways of programming open spaces to where you could have maybe small concerts if the city was so interested, like you used to have at the, what was it called? The Tornado Fest? Tornado Jam with Joe Ely. That could be awesome. But also other smaller kind of venues, smaller pavilions where you could have family reunions, or smaller pavilions yet that might have Wi-Fi access to where you could go out and do some work on your computer while being outside. But so thinking about all of those different kinds of personal but family-oriented spaces, because that's what we heard from your community survey. Additionally, working with the Lubbock Police Department to make sure that the whole Canyon Lake system, as more people are coming into the Canyon Lakes, that it's adequately patrolled, either on horseback or by bike or whatever. We have that in the Buffalo Bayou in Houston. It works great. And we did a somewhat of a thorough kind of analysis of the kinds of crime that's happened around. It's been fairly minor, but there might be a perception that this might be an unsafe place. So it's a perception, as you know, is reality in a lot of ways. So we need to make sure that we don't have that perception. Thinking about a branding program, we were looking back at all the 20s and 30s WPA and CCC kind of posters that were developed for the National Park System, and thinking about how could you brand this from a regional standpoint to really attract people to the Canyon Lakes. And then a plan for developing parks and recreational facility improvements around proposed lake number 7. This is very important. We would like to see, the Parks Department would like to see parks and recreational facilities provide the form for how the north side of the lake is developed. The city owns all the way up to, I'm sorry, I can't remember my streets anymore, 50th Street. So that's a whole lot of land, and the Water Resources Department is already right now going through a study on closing parts of your land application site. So this could be really viable prime real estate, in 20 years or so. So how can we get ahead of development and make sure that that we can plan the requisite trails and other parks facilities, so that gives form to how the whole thing ought to be developed. Lastly, we also looked at Lake Allen Henry and the Samwall Recreation Area and made any number of very important recommendations, from improving the entrance and the park entrance and the gate system, to having an online registration system, developing a convenience facility, improvements to the marina, maybe an additional crappie house. We also created a whole system of blueways as well there, additional campsites, improved and unimproved campsites. So that really can become a revenue-generating amenity, but one that is reliable for you. If you wanted to go down to Samwall Recreation Area and you drove an hour down there, you're hoping that there's going to be a campsite for you, but you can't be sure. So this could be a huge amenity, revenue-generating amenity, enterprise fund for the Parks Department. Finally, Chapter 6, we always are very interested in developing implementation-oriented plans. We don't want this plan to be sitting on Colby's bookshelf. We want it to be on his desk, all dog-eared with like sticky notes and stuff on it. So when we come back in 5 years to update it, we'll know what needs to be done. But so we laid out a thorough implementation plan as far as what it's going to take from a roles and responsibilities standpoint. It's going to require the backing of city leadership, of course, but the city's not going to be able to do this all by itself. It's going to take partnerships and coordination with people from around the region. So this is very important. It's going to take participation from you all as well. We need to maintain a very robust kind of public engagement program. But so we did develop an implementation action table that lays out a project schedule for when all of these different strategies and actions ought to happen, what kind of standards and regulations need to be in place to make sure these kind of projects or improvements can happen, what kind of partnerships and coordination will be required, who are the action leaders. Again, Parks Department has a huge role. They're kind of the caretaker of this whole plan, but they're going to be also doling out responsibilities to all the other departments as well. So who are the action leaders, from the finance department to the legal department to water resources, et cetera. But also we've provided all of the order of magnitude costs needed so you all can start budgeting well into the future what's going to be required. So with that, that is a thumbnail, literally a thumbnail overview of this Parks and Recreation Master Plan. It's been a pleasure, and I'm actually sorry that this project is coming to a close. I know that Colby can't wait for it to be done, but it's been great fun. I think it's a very well-informed plan, thanks to everyone's input. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Aaron, I think it's all right. We'll go out to the lobby. I have staff here, and the Captain Associates will be here as well. And so if you have any individual questions on any of the goals or objectives, we have some time allocated for that. So with that, we'll adjourn to the side. If you have any questions, feel free to grab them. Thank you.